Hi everyone, welcome to the number 6 video in the series. We've done videos 1 to 5, and that was looking at mark making and finding figures within those marks and then developing that into a more substantial image. Now this video, video 6, is titled Lyrical Abstraction. Now the materials that you need would be an A1 sheet of good sturdy cartridge paper or canvas. I much prefer to work on canvas. It's much more sensitive to your touch. It's got spring, it's got a weave, and it's just, you know, an altogether more interesting experience to work on rather than paper. I find paper fairly inert. It doesn't really give you much. I mean, expensive papers would be the exception, but anyway, with these exercises, I just felt that I would like to do what I normally do, to show you what I normally do, which is work on canvas. Now, I'm actually going to work in oils, but you can work in acrylic or oils. It doesn't really matter. We're all working in our own studios, so fumes, etc., are not going to be an issue. Now, if you're using acrylic, you're going to need some mediums to use with the acrylic. Okay, now this one here is it's a Matisse acrylic painting medium. This one here is a matte medium, and I've got another one over there which is like a flow medium. But any or all of those will work. The reason why we need a medium is to thin the paint down. If you thin the paint down with water, you will have problems with adhesion. And you know, once that paint goes down, you want it to stay there. So you can use that to cut your colors with, but also to create glazes. So that's all good. Now, oil. So I'm using oil. Now what I'm using, this is a Gamblin product. It's called Galcid, and the reason I use this, it's an alkyd medium, is because it's very, very fast drying. So, you know, quite often when you use oil, particularly if you're using it very thick, al fresco, you'll come in the next day and it's still wet. And so, in fact, some colors, you know, remain wet for several days. But this, when I come in tomorrow after starting this canvas, the paint will be dry, or pretty close to dry. Now, in the earlier videos, we looked at figuration. With this video, video 6 in Lyrical Abstraction, what we're actually going to do is withhold the figure for as long as possible. Now, you know, we had those 3 important themes from the first videos: image, color, and surface. And I related that to a 3-ball juggle, you know, keeping the 3 balls in the air at the one time. That will underpin this next series, or this next topic. But to start with, we're going to withhold the figure, or the image, if you like. So what we're going to do first and foremost, most importantly, is just to concentrate on building a surface, trying to find the picture plane and playing around with colors. And it almost doesn't matter what you put down to begin with, because it's going to change and you're going to work in layers, one over the other. So really for the early stages, you're not looking for an image, you're not looking for figures. You're just looking to create a surface, to put some raw material down, which will then in turn suggest shapes and forms. And if there's going to be an image evolve, let it come of its own accord. Okay, here we are. Now here's my palette, and I've just chosen Payne's Grey, which is a you know, a black, but it's really got some character to it. It's sort of a blue-black, magenta, white, Naples yellow. Doesn't really matter what colors you choose. It's almost arbitrary, because as soon as you start putting colors down, the colors will then ask you to expand the relationships, expand the harmony. So, you know, I always say to people, don't use bright yellow, because, and the reason for that is, if you look at this canvas, that is intensely bright. It's almost hard to look at. Some people say it's scary. The best thing to do is to use a color that, when you put it down, will create a contrast like that. Now, I mentioned before that I was using Galkid, which is a fast drying medium. So I'm just going to squirt a bit of that onto the palette to thin out the Payne's Grey. And my first foray is just to brush some pigment gently into the weave of the canvas, just to establish a connection, if you like, a touching connection with, and so I'm concentrating on the sensitivity of the feel of the brush and how that is going into the canvas, like so. Okay, I guess what I'm doing here too is just creating a sort of a balance. You know, light colours will speak to each other, and if I place them fairly evenly on the canvas, we start to get a bit of a dialogue. Now, edges are important. Don't forget your edges. Quite often, when people are painting, they'll just concentrate in an area like this, particularly when working on paper, and the edges get lost. Very, very important to consider the edges. There's a tremendous pressure when you put a shape close to the edge like that. Okay, it's acknowledging the extreme, the lateral edge, and it's creating a tension in this area. Whereas if you put that same shape in the middle here, you just don't get that same effect. Okay, so it's really important to consider those edges. All right, so I'm just basically just playing at the moment. There's no real intention other than just to get the feel of the paint, get the feel of the canvas, just put some colour around and establish these very, very, very early relationships. Okay, now my second colour is magenta. I'm going to mix a little bit of that with the Payne's Grey. So the Payne's Grey will actually be in probably a lot of the colours. So that I'm going to use that as the mother colour. Once again, put some more medium. Now you can see that that's fairly dark, and there's not a big difference in terms of value. So I might put, it's dark in the sense that the Payne's Grey is dark, so I might put a little bit of white into that. So rather than working with the shade, I'm now working with the tint. Okay, you can see it's got the Payne's Grey in it, so it is actually still relating to that first colour that I put down. Now remember in the earlier videos we did some gestures that tried to be suggestive of figures? Well, we're not really going to do that this time. At the moment we're just working with patches, colour patches, and gradually disappearing the intensity of that white until we reach the point where we'll probably get rid of all of the white, and then these shapes and forms start to have more authority. Okay, I might try a little bit of Naples yellow in this colour and see what that looks like. Main thing to remember is that at this early stage, you can't do anything wrong. There is no such thing as a wrong mark, because we're not trying to paint a painting at this stage. We're not trying to paint an image. What we're trying to do is enjoy the feel of the paint and just create a surface. Try and find where that picture, establish the picture plane. Now remember too that no mark is sacrosanct once it's put down. You can paint next to it, you can paint over it, and pick up some of that underpainting. But we're still within the realm of colour relationships and surface. That's all we're looking at. We're not looking for shapes and we're not looking for images at this stage. Okay, I'll just switch to a slightly larger brush. These are bristle brushes, by the way. I really like these because they've got resistance. I really love some of the nylon bristle brushes as well, the nylon filament brushes, I should say. But for oil, they tend to be a little bit soft. Okay, now you can see the intensity of that magenta. So that's really interesting from the point of view of colour and colour attributes. Here, we would have to call this colour and this colour a shade. Okay, because its light value is more on the dark side. And we'd call these lighter colours that I've mixed white with tints. So we've got our shades, we've got our tints. Now the other really important attribute of colour is intensity. So this is pretty much undiluted, and you can see that is very, very bright. Saturated in terms of its colour. So there's three different attributes already that are coming into play: tints, shades, and intensity. See that earlier patch that I put in is already starting to dry, and it's still showing as I paint over it. Probably better though to avoid getting too muddy with your paint at this early stage is to just work the white areas rather than the areas that you've already had pigment on. Okay, I'm moving back in. This is a tint now. I'm moving back into a tint. Tints and shades and intensities. Okay, still working on patches here, but as I'm gradually losing the white gessoed ground and putting more colour down, these colours are taking on shape. So I've really moved from gesture or colour patches into shape. So for instance, these two sort of columns here and this big shape here, sort of putting a downward pressure on the magenta shape. I've still retained that small iron shape from earlier on. So as we start, or as we continue the process of creating a surface, building the surface, at you know, we can't really help it, but at the same time, we start to create shapes and shape relationships. Now, I just want to talk about this color. Since the last stage, I have introduced a blue. And what I'm doing now is I'm mixing the magenta with the blue to create a color that's got a bit of both in it. And you know, by putting that down, it will automatically relate. So what I'm actually getting at here is that we just gradually, step by step, start to expand the palette.